Hold on. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Dan Schaiper, and I'm going to explain about how to do some wire inlay, silver wire inlay, and crushed stone inlay on particularly bowls. This is a wire inlay that you can buy from a muzzleloader supply company. I can give you the information if you'd like. And it comes in 0.008 millimeters, 0.01 millimeters in thickness, and it's 0.3 millimeters in width, and comes 36 inches long. It's fairly reasonable. It's about $5 for the 36 inches, which isn't real bad. And I'm going to explain how we're going to do that. And this tool here is what we're using. It's a 16th inch drill bit drilled into wood, and then we file down the edges of it until it gets a fine chisel point, and that's what we're going to be using today for this. And we use a small hammer to do that. And also, if you have one of these rulers, the flat rulers, they work good, and I'll show you how we get that hammer on here so we don't bend the wire. There's also a micro flush cutter. You can use a regular cutter, but these are really nice for cutting that wire flush when we're trying to clip it off at the ends. We're also going to be doing some stone inlay, crushed stone inlay, and you need a file for that, also for the brass. And if you have a chisel, to chisel out the areas that we're going to put the inlay in. And if you want to put a center in of a brass tube, I'll show you how to do that, and it's nice to have just a little saw to do that with. And for the center of it, we're using just a little hand drill. It works the best. And I'll show you in a minute. We'll get started. Okay. It's also good to have a pair of these magnifiers, because we're getting in close, and when we're putting this trough in there for the wire inlay, it's really hard to see without them, especially as we get a little bit older. And before we get started, what I want to mention is it's good when you have a bowl and you turn a bowl down to maybe ½ inch or ¼ inch thickness, to put you keep your tenon on and put it on the chuck. And it's good to turn something that will fit inside of that, another bowl or something, because that way it keeps this pretty solid here, so it's not bouncing around on you and chance of cracking it as you're going around here, because you're tapping into this thing. And you can jam chuck it if you have a thicker bowl, and I've done that before, and that seems to work okay, but you have to really be careful. So we're going to get started here, and I've already made a trough in here already to some degree, and you try to keep your little chisel as parallel as possible to your workpiece, and it becomes very tedious because you're going a 16th inch at a time. And first of all, what I want to mention is you put your pattern on here. And I did this on a walnut bowl with the transfer paper. It's a white transfer paper. If you can have another, use your graphite paper. And I just made some patterns, and you try to get it as even as possible after you've sanded your bowl down to maybe 220. And I'm going to continue on here. Like I said, this becomes very tedious and very slow process. And we're only going about 0.25 millimeters deep. And if you can mark that on your chisel if you want, but it doesn't take long to get a pretty good feel for it. And just follow your pattern around. What you have to be careful of is sometimes you'll be off just a little bit and your grain will cross over. And if that happens, you just kind of get it back in place by doing that. And continue on. And when I finish this, I'll show you how we're going to get that wire inlay in there.
Okay.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Before we get started, I want to show that what we need to do is rough up the silver wire a little bit, and just take your file and just run it across it, and that just helps it secure it in the trough when we get started here. What we do is try to get this in the slot. I know you can't probably see me, can you?
Not real well.
Shut it off for a minute.
I'm rolling a little bit of camera.
Now we're laying the wire inlay, and you can kind of get it down in the trough with your fingers a little bit, and then lay your ruler on top if you can, and just lightly tap it and get it started in the trough there. How well you can see that with my hands in the way, but again, it's very tedious work, and you want to make sure you don't bend that wire, because that makes it more difficult for yourself. And you're leaving this a little proud, because what you're going to do is either file it off or sand it off. There's a little area that has some fibers crossing, so I'm just going to just clean that out just a little bit, so this goes in there. Not going to use the ruler. You have to really be careful that you don't bend that wire down.
Okay. Go ahead.
Now that we got to the end, I'm just going to clip this off with my flush cutters. And then I can finish putting the rest of this inlay in here. I might have clipped it just a tad long, which is better than a tad short. There we go. Hammer that the rest of the way down, how much is sticking up here. Alright. Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Now that the wire inlay's in, we're going to put in a little flower here, and I took the liberty of going around with my little tool around the edges already, the petals. If you have a Fordham, you can use that to dig it, to gouge it out. I'm just going to use a little gouge here in a minute. But first of all, we're going to put a brass tube in there, just a piece of brass in there. And I presume you could probably use, well, I've used a brass tube before, and then fill that brass tube with a different color. You can use a plain piece of brass, which is what I'm going to use here. Or you could use brass shavings if you like. But I'm going to use this center punch first, So we get a start on there, and then what I have here, we're just gonna, this is the same diameter as my tube, which I've measured previously. I'm just going to go down just a little bit here, just far enough to get a brass tube in there. Now that chipped out some, but that's alright. It's not going to hurt too much because we're going to gouge out some of that anyway with a for the pedals. Get that brass tube in there. I'm just going to put CA glue all through there. Just to set it a little bit. Make sure that's fairly solid there. And then I'm just going to carefully saw this off. Try not to mar the wood, the bowl. You can take and file that down a little bit. Again, be careful not to scratch up the wood. Now I'm just going to take and gouge out carefully my pedals here. Get away the camera there. You don't have to show all this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Now we're going to put in some of this crushed stone. Now that we have that center piece in, we're just going to lay some of this just liberally lay it in all those places there. Try not to get too much out of the area. Make sure you get all your pedals covered. More is better. And we're going to take our famous CA glue and just cover it with CA glue. The accelerator. That's on there, and then we can take the file, being careful, and just filing all that extra off. Till you get down so far, and then you just then you'll sand it.
Okay.
You there?
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
And this is the finished product after you've sanded all this and you've taken and filed down your wire inlay and then sanded. And it's best to go down to 400 to 600 grit, which I didn't do that yet, but I just wanted to show the finished product. I put some wire inlays in these ends also, and that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call or contact me. Thank you.